We're about to talk about the single deadliest accident in aviation history. And honestly, it's a story of such unbelievable circumstances, a series of tiny, unrelated events that all lined up to create a catastrophe that's just hard to even imagine. And this number, well, it really says it all. 583 people. Now, just to put that into perspective, that is a higher death toll than any other single plane crash ever. But what makes this story so completely mind-boggling is where it happened. That's right. This wasn't a plane falling out of the sky. This whole disaster was a collision between two massive jumbo jets on a runway. So the question that just hangs in the air is, how? How on earth does something like this happen? You have two of the most advanced airplanes of their time, experienced crews. How do they end up in the exact same spot at the exact same time? Well, let's unpack it. The first thing you have to get your head around is that this wasn't one single catastrophic failure. Nope, this was a long, improbable chain of bad luck, where every single link connected just perfectly to create the absolute worst-case scenario. And it all started with a terrorist bomb at their original destination, Gran Canaria. This crazy event forced a whole bunch of flights, including our two 747s, to divert to this small regional airport on Tenerife, an airport that was absolutely not equipped to handle a sudden flood of jumbo jets. So by the time Gran Canaria reopened, Los Rodeos was just pure chaos. You know, this whole thing is a textbook example of what's called the Swiss cheese model of accidents. The idea is you have all these layers of safety, right? But each one has tiny little holes in it. A disaster only happens when all those holes on every single layer line up perfectly. So here, the bomb threat, that was the first hole. Then the airport was so congested they had to use the actual runway to taxi planes around. That's hole number 2. Then the KLM captain gets anxious about flight time limits and decides to top off the fuel tanks, adding a 35-minute delay, hole number 3. And during that delay, the final fatal piece falls into place. A thick, dense fog rolls in, and visibility drops to practically zero. All the holes just lined up. So, with the stage set, with the fog and the congestion, the focus now zooms right into the cockpits and the control tower, because this is where a series of deadly misunderstandings would seal everyone's fate. Okay, so picture it. The KLM 747 is sitting at the end of the runway, completely wrapped in fog. The captain, Jacob von Zonten, this guy was one of KLM's top pilots. He starts pushing the throttles forward for takeoff. And his own first officer speaks up and says this. It's right there on the cockpit voice recorder. A clear warning, a chance to stop. So after being challenged, the first officer radios the tower, reads back their flight path, and then he says this incredibly vague, non-standard phrase, "We are now at takeoff." What does that even mean? Does it mean we are in the process of taking off, or we are in position for takeoff? Well, the captain heard the first one, and he committed. The throttles went forward, and right here, this is the next unbelievable piece of bad luck. At the exact same microsecond, two critical messages get transmitted. The tower tells KLM to stand by for takeoff. And at the same time, the Pan Am crew, who are still on the runway, radios in saying they're still taxiing. The two messages hit each other, creating this loud 3-second squeal in the KLM cockpit. Both warnings were completely blocked out, gone. But wait, there was one last chance. After the squeal, the KLM flight engineer overheard the tower talking to the Pan Am jet. So with the engines roaring to life, he asks his captain this one last vital question. Think about the guts it took to question the chief pilot at that moment. And the captain's response was just chillingly confident. Oh, yes. That was it. In his mind, under all that pressure from the delays, he was sure they were cleared. He was wrong. And the KLM 747 started hurtling down that runway, totally blind, into a wall of fog. What happened next was the inevitable, horrifying conclusion to that long chain of errors, a moment that is just frozen in the history of aviation. So try to put yourself in that Pan Am cockpit. You're slowly moving down the runway, squinting into the fog, looking for your exit. And then, out of nowhere, you see landing lights. And they're not just on, they're getting bigger, and they're coming at you at almost 300 kilometers an hour. It must have looked like a phantom. This is the raw terror you hear on the voice recorder from the Pan Am captain. Just pure instinct kicks in. He slams the throttles to full power and yanks the controls hard left, trying desperately to swerve his massive jet off the runway and onto the grass. The KLM pilot finally sees the Pan Am jet and hauls back on the stick, trying to basically leapfrog over it. He pulls up so aggressively that the tail of his 747 scrapes along the concrete for over 20 meters. He actually gets airborne, but it's just a fraction of a second too late. The bottom of the KLM jet slices right through the top of the Pan Am. The result was just complete devastation. The KLM plane, fatally damaged, slams back down onto the runway and explodes into a fireball. The Pan Am jet is torn wide open and also erupts in flames. Every single one of the 248 people on the KLM flight was killed. On the Pan Am, by some miracle, 61 people, including the flight crew, survived, but 335 did not. Out of the ashes of a tragedy this immense, the aviation world was forced to learn. It had to. Some of the hardest but most important lessons in flight safety came directly from this day. The industry was about to change forever. So, the biggest immediate change? They literally rewrote the language of flying. They took any ambiguity and just threw it out the window. Vague words like okay were banned. And the word takeoff? That word became sacred. It is now only ever used when giving or reading back the final official takeoff clearance, period. But an even bigger, more profound change was the birth of something called Crew Resource Management, or CRM. And this changed everything. It completely dismantled the old culture of the infallible, godlike captain who could never be questioned. CRM not only empowers, it requires junior crew members to speak up, to challenge a captain if they think something is wrong. It's the foundation of what we now call psychological safety in any high-stakes team. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? First, that huge disasters are rarely one big thing. They're almost always a chain of small things. Second, that clear, standardized communication isn't just a nice-to-have, it is literally a matter of life and death. And finally, that the safest teams are the ones that flatten out the hierarchy and let everyone have a voice. The painful lessons learned at Tenerife are a huge reason why flying is one of the safest things you can do today. And it really leaves you with this one final, pretty sobering thought. So much of the progress we make in complex systems is written in blood. The safety that we all just take for granted was paid for by tragedies just like this one. And it forces us to ask that really tough question: how do we learn these lessons before something terrible happens?